Sweet surrender, as I love, serve, and remember.
My beautiful friends. So I heard this wonderful story about, told from the point of a view of a guy who plays Blue Man. Are any of you familiar with Blue Man? A few of you are. So they perform on stage and Broadway, but also around the country, and they're all blue, and they don't talk through the whole show. It's very rhythmic, and they do all these cool things, and you just get caught up in this world. So the guy telling the story told about when he first auditioned, and then he got the part, and learning all the I don't know what you call it, all the activities, the skills and talents that they do to create this whole environment and the rhythm and the drumming. And it's extraordinary, and it's like this wonderful, he couldn't believe he made a job out of it, and he does it every day, and he's doing all these shows, and he loves it. And he said, but he's been doing it for years. And he said, I think I was on my something like 2,400th show or something like that. And he said the joy and the uniqueness and the creativity of it was getting old. And so it was really hard just not to show up being on automatic pilot for all of us. We were like this, we had mastered the skills, we knew it backward and forward. And one of the things they do is every show they find someone, it's his job to find someone from the audience to come up and participate for a good part of the show. And everyone who's watching is always like, oh, I'm so glad it's them and not me, because we put them through things to do various things. And so we want to pick someone who's really open and excited and willing. And he says, I'm pretty good at finding that person, connecting, and then I connect with them, and like, okay. So he is out in the audience, and he connects with this person, and he said she's glowing. She's just like open, yes, and he's like, that's my person. So he goes over and he asks to bring her up, and they have people wear ponchos in the front rows, because I guess a lot of stuff goes on. They squirt a lot of stuff. So she took off her poncho, and she only had one arm. And this is a very physical group. And he just goes into panic, like, what do I do? Sit down? How do I rework the show? And suddenly, that which had become routine was suddenly very intense and terrifying. And he looked at his two partners, I guess there's three of them, and they're terrified, and they don't know what to do, so they just bring her up. And so they call it inviting a guest to the feast. So they have everyone sitting at a table. And they said the first thing was easy, light a candle, she could do that. And they said nothing is spoken, so everything is mind. And so they give her a lamp, and she's supposed to turn it on. She turns it on, and it doesn't go on. And he said, I know what my friend is the one who does sort of the joke, but I'm knowing what the joke is. In my head, I'm yelling, no! And the guy goes, it's a clap-on lamp, and she can't do that. He said the room goes silent. There's no joy in the realization of it's sort of like throwing in her face that she can't do this. And they're just swimming. They're like, the guys are like, how are we going to do it? Where do we go? And the next part is with Twinkies. And I don't know what the routine, he didn't really say what the routine is. It sounded like part of it was like joking about how to even open up the Twinkies. And they're like, how's she going to open up the Twinkies? And so they just keep going, and they put the Twinkie package on her plate, and they all have a plate with a Twinkie on it. And she just picks it up, and with her arm, this part that's to the little piece that was left, she just rips it right on open and puts it on her plate, beaming, just smiling. And he's like, oh, she can do this. And so then he looks at her and goes, and he gives her his, and she rips it, and she starts ripping, and the whole place lights up, because they realize this is going to be completely new, and this little girl is blowing them all away. And he said it was the best show. And he said it reawakened everything inside of me to remember what we do and to be alive in the moment when something feels like it's going to be a total disaster. He said by the end, all three of us were crying, so we didn't think we couldn't get to the show, and this beautiful, open-hearted little girl opened us all up and woke all of us up to something greater than we'd ever experienced. That beautiful light. It doesn't take a lot. It just takes that purity of light that doesn't have a no inside of it, that doesn't have the intelligence or experience to say, oh, I can't do this. She was open and willing and found a way to move through it, and they moved with her. And it was an extraordinary experience because of her yes, because of that beautiful, powerful light. And that's what we all have. At the center of all of our beings is this incredible power of creativity. The infinite presence. When we say we are one, that there's one power, there's one presence, there's one love, that presence is always creative. When we say it's always giving of itself, what it's giving is its creativity. It's constantly creating through and as us. And so the more we are innocent and allow that vehicle to shine and flow through us, we are that creative expression. And that's where we get our greatest joy. So creativity is always there. But what happens when it gets blocked? When we feel limited in some way, and sometimes, and what that blockage could look different and does look different at different parts of our life. So I'm not going to talk about any particular kind of blockness. Well, I'll talk about a couple different ones, but to recognize there's all different ways we can get blocked. But we have to remember, and the principle is spirit, this divine presence, is never blocked. So when we say we have a creativity block, what we say is we have a human block. Spirit is never blocked. Spirit's always creating of itself. It's not bored. It is not struggling to figure out a new way or a wonderful way to shine through. It already knows. We're the ones who get that blockness. And sometimes that what unblocks us, as Gloria shared in the reading today, are those moments of travail, those difficult moments. It was that moment of finding that you invited someone to the stage who did not fit the way it's supposed to look. And terror filled them, but from that place, something absolutely beautiful got birthed. That when we're the most uncomfortable and when we're struggling the most is often the time when something absolutely new can be birthed that we can never imagine. As long as we're continuing on our routine. I mean, the three blue men are incredibly gifted and talented men. They had mastered these skills and this ability to perform, and yet that wasn't the thing that brought them alive. What brought them alive was this innocent, pure light that just showed up and woke them all up. So sometimes the thing that wakes us up is not only the challenge, but the thing that's completely unexpected, that we can't plan. They couldn't have planned that. And so what happens, and I know many of you know this, when we get stuck, and so block is one way, stuck is another one. I'm just stuck. I just keep doing it, like the blue man was talking about. We just do the same thing. I'm stuck. I don't know how to make it alive. And so often in your own personal life, you might feel stuck in certain areas. You might feel blocked in a certain area. And what happens is those habit patterns get really congealed. You know they're not working, but no matter, even the more you work on it, it's like a knot. Sometimes the more you work on it, the tighter it gets, the more hard and congealed it gets, and it feels almost impossible to find liberation, to break free. And so it takes almost like an external event, like a hammer, to hit it open, to loosen it, to break it up. And nobody wants to get hit by a hammer because it really hurts. It's painful. But we can recognize that sometimes that's the only thing that's going to break it up, because no matter how hard we try, no matter how much push and pull and pull and pull, it just gets tighter and tighter, and I can't break free. So we need something really hard to hit us from outside. And if we only look at the pain that hammer is bringing to us, we're going to miss the incredible, amazing possibility of, by breaking something open, something incredibly new and brilliant and beautiful gets broken free. Not that I'm advocating getting hit by a hammer, but we do get stuck. We do get limited and stuck in our ways, as they say, stuck in our ways. Creativity isn't flowing. A relationship is blocked. Something at work is blocked. A health challenge, a financial challenge. It could come in many different ways. And you just, no matter how hard you try, it's not shifting. And then there's other ways. I mean, to break up stuck energy, and it doesn't always have to be a hammer. It can be through taking chances, by purposely making yourself uncomfortable. Often when we're like this, we don't want to make ourselves uncomfortable. So there's another great story that I heard, and I was going to tell it this morning, but I've just discovered Moth News, the Story Hour. It's been around for decades, or since 2012 at least. I've just discovered it, so all I do is listen to Moth stories now, and I've listened to so many I couldn't find it. So you're going to have to, this is just by memory, can't remember names, but this woman had a baby. She was very excited, but she had postpartum depression, and she couldn't get out of it. So she did a lot of the medication and the help, and so slowly over time the postpartum depression after a year really started to fade away, but she couldn't find the joy in life. She was always afraid it was going to come back. Every little thing is going to come back. And so she found herself living life very fearful and closed and small. And she just couldn't break free of it. No matter what she did, she just couldn't get to that place where she felt light and free like she once felt. So after 5 years, she said, you know what, I'm tired of this. I have to do something extreme. So she wrote her friends and her family. She sent an email to them and said, I've decided for 1 year, I will, for every amount of money that you give to my favorite charity, I will do whatever you tell me to do. If you tell me to do something, I'll do it. And that's why I wanted to go back, because they told her to do hysterical things. One of them is she had to spend a week talking completely like in Shakespearean English. And one was like she lived in Boston. She had to walk to the western side of Massachusetts, however long it took, she had to walk nonstop or by herself and she did all these things. Her husband did one where she had to, what is it when you break into a party? She had to go into a bar mitzvah. Crash the bar mitzvah, and her husband was Jewish, but she wasn't, and she said, I find myself on the road driving to the Goldbergs bar mitzvah. Like, what am I going to do? And then she found out it wasn't a bar mitzvah; it was a bat mitzvah, which is for a girl. And then the goal is she has to get a picture with her, and so she just starts making she introduces herself. What are you doing here? I don't even remember. She makes up stories, and they're going with her. She's like, oh, they're believing me, and somehow she works out well. And you get something I get a prize if I get a picture, and so she gets the picture, and this whole explosion of like, I did it. And all year long she does these crazy things, and she said by the end of the year all depression was gone, the limitations were gone, I was alive and full of joy of life again. And she started creating nonprofits, and her energy and the creative energy, all by intentionally making herself uncomfortable. Not like she's going to spend the rest of her life crashing parties or walking across the state or speaking in a Shakespearean accent. They were just moments, but those moments pulled her out of the knot. That was a way to pull her out of our knot. And so we can have the pain, and that works. It absolutely works. And sometimes we can't control it. Sometimes it's pain we didn't invite, but it's just there. And we can be proactive and say, what can I do to push myself out of a comfort zone? I remember when I was in acting school, that's always big, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. And I remember one of the exercises was, when you go onto an elevator, mostly when you go on an elevator, everybody goes in the elevator and turns around and faces front. So they said, don't do that. Just walk into the elevator and just face everybody. It's hysterical. I mean, it's really awkward when you just go in and you're facing everybody, but it's funny too. And the more you start doing these things, everything starts to lighten up. You stop taking yourself so seriously. You develop a playful spirit, and then that creativity, gets to shine through. So one way to allow that creative voice in you to come out is to do things, fun things, playful things, nothing that's going to hurt anybody or yourself, but playful things, challenging things that are going to take you out of your comfort zone and remind you that you are an infinite being of light, that you are an infinite energy of creativity, and you are not this knot. That knot is not who you are. Now, I want to share a personal liberation moment of a knot that I've had for, I would say, most of my life. And I want to use it as a story, because sometimes when we tell these stories, just like I have, it's like a moment or experience, or like here's steps 1, 2, 3 to break break free. What I loved about that reading is it's pointing to the Exodus. Sometimes we have bigger knots, and it's a soul journey to uncover them and to heal them. It's not a step, here's step 1, step 2, step 3 type thing. It's not, oh, here's an easy answer. If you just pray about it, it goes away. It's been a journey for me. And yet it's a journey that I treasure, because in working through that knot, I've discovered more about who I am every step of the way. And so the knot for me was, as you know, I loved my family, adored them, loved being a Hawkins. I felt very proud to be a Hawkins in my family, just out in the world as well. Very proud of my older brothers and my parents. And as I've mentioned to most of you previously, I didn't always feel at home because they were very strong and forthright, and I was shy and introverted, and I didn't have that same approach to life. I was very spiritual, loved God. They had no time for that. It's not that they had no time, I just think they believed in themselves tremendously, in a wonderful way. So I loved being part of the family, but I always felt like I was on the outside just a little bit. And if I told them that, they'd say, no, we love you, you're just, they always overcompensate. We love you so much, which is true. I know they love me, but there was, for me personally, because the things I knew that mattered to me did not matter to any of them. And so that just put me a little bit on the outside. So I was inside but outside, and what that left in me was this longing to belong, to find that place where I absolutely fit, where I would go, oh, these are my people. They see the world the way I do. They get excited about the things I do. So that was a longing that I had through my life, that I will feel really joyful and happy when I find my people. And so the more I stepped into my spirituality and going to my first spiritual community was the Santa Anita Church, Agape. And Agape, this is a church that's alive with spirit, and it's open. Everyone's talking about their spiritual experiences. People are sharing and heart to heart, not just in classes. It's an expressive community. And I was in the middle of everything. I worked in the Department of Education. I was in the ministerial school, working for them. So I was getting to know all the area ministers because they wanted me to schedule them to teach classes. I got home office. So I was in the middle of everything. I belonged like you couldn't belong. Reverend Michael's down this hallway. I'm connected. I'm loved. I still don't feel like I belong. I'm accepted. No one's telling me I should be any different than I am. But I still felt different because a lot of times I questioned things that I was like, I don't always agree with this, or I don't always, and are you allowed to disagree and have an open, I just didn't know, and so then I was reading Ken Wilber, and he brought stuff, clarity, and as some of you know, because I used to talk about it much more a long time ago, I was visioning with my friend every Saturday night, Stephanie Clark. And when we visioned, every single Saturday, I got the same vision, which made absolutely no sense to me, which is the vision for my ministry was being a cowgirl. And that I had no connection with, I rode horses when I was a kid, but no connection with being a cowgirl. And then I realized, I have a classmate who's an actual cowgirl. She has a ranch and she rides her horses out every day and takes care of them. She's a rancher. And so I started asking her about being a cowgirl, and I'm listening to her. I'm like, man, I don't resonate with any of this. Why do I keep getting a vision of being a cowgirl? It made no sense. And I don't need to go into all of it. It's been an exploration. And so as I'm going on this journey, I become a minister of Centers for Spiritual Living. But I was never, I love this teaching. I've been in it for 35 years, so it's part of me, but it's not the thing that brings me alive. And I love what Ernest Holmes teaches, and I've learned so much from him, but Ernest Holmes himself isn't the thing that brings me alive. And you don't realize that until most of my colleagues get really excited by Ernest Holmes, and they all talk about him, and I just don't have that same feeling. So again, I'm part of it, but always a little bit on the outside. It's like the same pattern of always like just almost being there, but not quite. And I have all these other teachers, Yogananda, Shinobu Suzuki, Joel Goldsmith, Julian of Norwich, St. Porphyrios. I got a lot of different teachers. But I don't feel at home. I don't feel any places like that's my place. So personally, there's always this feeling of I don't quite belong. And then as a minister, that became a huge issue for me. Not in an intellectual issue, but a heart. Because this is a soul knot that I'm struggling with. And I used to sit in front of my altar, praying and crying and saying, look, Shunryu, he came here to teach Zen. Yogananda came here to teach Kriya. Ernest Holmes taught his thing. Everybody has their thing to teach. I don't have any one thing to teach. I study it all, but I don't have any one. If you said, what's your teaching? I don't have one that brings me alive. I haven't found my people yet. Who are my people? What is my path? What am I here to teach? You've asked me to be a minister. I'm being a minister, but I still don't have this clear path. I was envious of watching ministers who really got excited by whatever path they were on, and they became experts and masters at it. And I'm like, I can't ever do that. I mean, I could if I could find my path, but I couldn't find my path. So it's been a constant knot that I couldn't break free from. And then when I started the Lighthouse, I was like, well, I'm going to do my own thing. But that was a source, and I'm a cowgirl, I'm doing my own thing, but it was against something. I was always had this sort of rebellious energy. For those of you who don't know, just so you know who I am, I'm not an ordained CSL minister. I'm a licensed minister, but not ordained, because I always thought it would be out of integrity for me to get ordained in CSL, because CSL is about Ernest Holmes, and I don't feel like my ministry is about specifically Ernest Holmes. My ministry is about God, which includes Ernest Holmes, but includes a lot of people, and no more Ernest Holmes than anybody else. I'm not more Ernest Holmes than anyone else. So it felt out of integrity. So I'm always doing it, but not doing it. In the group, but not in the group. And it hurts, and it's painful. And as much as I like to say I'm doing my own thing, I didn't want to be doing my own thing. I wanted to belong. I wanted to be part of something, and part of what I was looking at, the rebellious part of me, part of it was I wanted them to change so I could belong. If they didn't change, I couldn't belong to them, so part of the fighting was like, if they could just change, if I could change people to be like me, then I would belong. But then be like me, how? I don't even have I've tried writing in books, and I've tried so many times. If I just write my book, I can't. It feels like it feels dead. As soon as I start writing, it doesn't feel alive. I haven't not called to do that yet. But over the last couple years, what's been happening is I've been softening. I've been getting clearer that people who are ministers of whatever teaching are amazing people. And I really respect them. And I listen to them, and I'm like, they're really good at what they do. I can't do that, but I really admire them. And so that rebellious thing of having to fight against it started to dissolve. And I began to appreciate what people were doing with whatever teaching or path that they were on as they stood in that level of mastery, having given themselves year after year after year to whatever teaching or path. There became a brilliance that flowed through them. And I didn't have to fight against it. It maybe didn't always resonate with me, but I could appreciate it. Now, part of why I wanted to belong, so the deep belief that I was carrying, this soul knot, was that my greatest joy was going to happen when I found my people. The greatest happiness was going to be when I knew what teaching was mine to teach. Those were the beliefs, and so nobody could really convince me that I was going to find greater happiness by not finding a teaching and not finding my people. I also wanted to wake up spiritually, and I believed what Yogananda said, because I saw it in people. Like, oh, they're climbing. He would say, there's a mountain, and all the different paths, all the different world's religions are at the bottom, and you could spend your time learning all the different religions, but eventually, if you want to climb up the mountain, you have to pick a path, and you have to really give yourself and climb. And so that's what I saw people doing. I started really, once I stopped rebelling and just watched, oh, they're climbing up the mountain and I'm not. I can't, so not only do I not belong, but I can't climb up this mountain until I find what my path is, and I can't find my path. How can I teach other people to find a path if I don't have a path that I'm teaching? You didn't know that was all going in my head. These knots, these soul knots, they're so deep. All that, it's pain, but it's a deep soul struggle, and nobody could solve it for me. Not a single person. I mean, I hear things, didn't hit. I've been doing this a long time. I know a lot of people telling me a lot of different things. It had to be something that was resolved as I listened to my soul. And so this week, as I've been softening around it and getting a little, so I did all these paths, and my last path was sort of this Christian path, because I thought, well, that's my root. So, and then these Orthodox monks who lead by spirit, not by religion, and they're extraordinary beings of love, and I mean, just see through your soul. And they lived when I lived. These aren't long ago, and they're extraordinary. So I'm like, oh, but they don't have a path. They don't have a school. They say, go to our church. And I do love some of their stuff, but there's a lot I don't like. I'm like, I can't be Christian either. I have no path. But I started saying, but I really have been following the Christ within me. I've been acknowledging that more and more. I've never stopped listening. And so when this week, in my effort to learn about Christianity, because I hadn't done much, I mean, I've done some, but not much. So I'm reading through the scriptures, and I read this week, I read this verse that years ago, back in the early 2000s, Yogananda had come to me, because I wasn't doing any Christianity at that time. He said, and he told me about the story about the woman of Samaria, the woman by the well. Go look up that verse. So I went and looked up the verse, and I got it. I liked it. He's the wellspring of life. Got it. Cool. I couldn't figure out why I was being asked to look at that. Well, this week, as I was reading it, that was the verse I read. And Jesus said something that I used to say as a kid. I don't know where I heard it as a kid, but it caught into my soul, which he said, she was asking about where do you worship in a temple. He goes, it doesn't matter if you're in your temple or in the mountains. That's not where you find me. You find me in spirit. Worship me in spirit and truth. And suddenly I realized, oh, now that I've been doing my whole life. Oh, I have been climbing that mountain. Everything I do is following that presence within me. I have no one to give me an authority. I have no religious path. I have no teaching that I can offer other than I would say my foundation personally is love the Lord your God with your whole heart, body, mind, and soul. In doing that, you will find your path, and every path is unique. But that teaching might not excite you, and so I see my job as a minister is to help each person find your voice. Because as I was reading that, I'm like, I got it. And then Friday morning, I was journaling, and that image of all that, I've been watching a detective show on TV. It's a French detective show, and the guy is a mountain detective, and he spends a lot of time in the mountains, hiking. It's beautiful in the French mountains. And his colleague says, you remind me, because I was just watching an American Western. This is all subtitled. And I was watching cowboys, and you're a cowboy. You love to just be on your own. And he made it so beautiful. It wasn't rebellious. He wasn't fighting anyone. He was a beautiful man. In fact, his nickname was Kindness. And I was thinking so I've been thinking about that, worship me in spirit. And then Friday morning, oh, I'm a cowgirl. And I've said that before, sort of in a rebellious kind of way, but I got it to the depth of my soul. I'm a cowgirl. I like roaming around by myself. I like being my own person. And anytime I get part of an organization, I like it. But anytime where I feel like I have to constrict myself, I pull back. And that's okay. I can be my own person. And as that weight of the longing that I have to belong somewhere, I have to belong to a group, I have to belong to a teaching, when all of that dropped away, the lightness, I was telling Jack, I went for a walk, and it was like I hit that burning bush. That burning bush in the reading, I don't know if because you only heard it once, I'll put it on Facebook. They said, it's a burning bush you've passed 1,000 times, but suddenly it's on fire when you're ready to see it. I have been told so many times in so many ways that this is my path. The very first experience, and I won't go any more into it, but my first experience was when I first gave my life to God. I was reading a book on the 4 paths of Hinduism, and I realized my path was the path of reflection. I always thought it was the path of love. I mean, we're all of them, by the way. But as I'm realizing I've been this way my whole life, I can't help but reflect about everything. Everything opened up. Everything became light. The walls dissolved. I was living in Brentwood at the time, LA, which is full of big, wealthy homes, and I became one with this homeless guy who used to walk the streets, and I was one with him. And I always thought, well, and then it was a big, long thing, but it was a really powerful, very intentional, I've always thought that was very intentional, mystical experience. This is your path. And I liked the path of being reflective, but I never liked the fact that the person I connected with was a homeless man. I'm like, why can't I? And he was surrounded by wealth and beauty, all of it good. But he was the homeless man. And what I finally realized on Friday was, oh, I'm the homeless man and I'm the person on the inside, because when I know who I am, the walls dissolve and there's no separation. There's no separation between all those organizations and teachings and paths and that person who's homeless. That the cowgirl or the cowboy or the individual houseless person is still, when we are ourselves, when we become and accept ourselves, we are one with everything. And so what I discovered on Fridays, I felt more connected than I had felt in years, because I stopped looking externally to find where my connection was, who my people were. It was inside. And when I accepted, finally, and I might have to have this, I'm doing this just so I remember it in 2 weeks, to remember that when I'm just me and it feels like I'm alone, it's the exact opposite. That the more I am me and embrace what was given to me, and everyone's different, I'm just using myself as an example. When I embraced that, I felt connected to everybody. It was only when I was trying to reach out and connect that way that I always felt alone and separate. So it was the paradox. By being and accepting my solo journey, I actually felt more connected than I ever felt. Does that make sense? That's the belief system I was working with. And I use that as an example because I believe, I loved, when I saw that reading, it just hit me, because it's like I've been told this so many times in so many different visions in little moments, but it wasn't what I wanted to hear, because if anyone said to me prior to all that the soul had to do all this work, is if anyone said, well, here, your real joy is just sort of being on your own, I'd be like, no, your real joy is not being on your own. Your real joy is when you're connected with people. Everything is multiplied when you're with people. And so I had a very strong intellectual conception of what it was. But Spirit has been taking me deeper into really understanding what true connection was. Every one of us has this beautiful prophecy that's been there all the time. We've all had that burning bush, and we pass it a million times. But when we're ready, it opens up. And that's sort of a dramatic experience. But even the blue men with that little girl, it was just an evening, but it was a beautiful opening of her little, beautiful radiant light. Every light matters. The fire of the burning bush is in every one of us. Every one of us is the great I am. In that reading, it says, when you see that burning bush, you remember the great I am. Every one of you is the great I am. And when we're talking about creativity, we're not talking about little squeaky creativity. We're talking about a creativity that is pouring through the entire cosmos all of the time. And that infinite energy is pouring through all of us all of the time. And every story is essential. I'm sorry, I'm going really long. So real fast. I heard this one other story, just heard it this morning, loved it. And it was a guy named Herbert Broom, and he was telling the story. He grew up in Mississippi. He was 10 years old. It's 1963, and these men are coming to his dad's house, and they're figuring out how to get voter registration. One of them is the secretary of the NCCA, Meadow, I forgot his name, Wally. And so someone I never heard of, by the way, and they're getting voter registration. His mom writes a letter to the Lighthouse to get voter registration. She can't send it to the White House because they said it won't get out of the county, so they send it to Chicago. Then it goes to the White House. One day, this guy Meadow is coming to his dad's house, who's a minister in the area, and he gets shot in the back and killed. But right after that, the message comes from the Lighthouse through people come, and they say, we're going to get you voter registration here. This is not okay. And so he has the opportunity he's 10 years old, but he's already learned how to drive, and his dad said, take these two elders to the voter registration. They push back a little, but he convinces them to go. They sign up, and he said, you have to do it so when I vote, so I get to vote when I'm 18. And so they were thrilled when they registered to vote. When he turned 18, first thing that his parents did was take him to the courthouse. I mean, it was a big deal. And he said, those names like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Rosa Parks, all those names, they're around forever, what they did to allow this powerful thing called voting. And he said, their names will never die, at least on my watch. I will always tell these stories. And then he started singing This Little Light of Mine. And the thing that came to me, I didn't know any of the people he mentioned. I didn't know who the secretary of the NAACP was in Mississippi. I never heard of him or his dad. I didn't know any of the names. So until this morning, I had never heard this story. You could say that light was so dim, it didn't make a difference. But when it is the great I am light, it doesn't matter. Because your light, when you connect with the great I am, you are connecting with the greatest stories that are happening on this planet right now. Right now. Your light, people may or may not know it, but by you saying yes to being the great I am and showing up over and over as that light, you're impacting everyone in ways that you don't even know, that are impacting this great story of the I am, because the great story of the I am is happening right now. The great light of the I am is happening right now. The infinite cosmic light is birthing its story right now as every one of you. And it's available to you now. Let us all continue to do our soul work until we are willing and wildly excited about letting that light shine brilliantly and powerfully in every area of our life. That's our soul work. And that's what we're here to do. Let's pray. And as we pray, we turn to that wonderful cosmic light. And that's the light beyond light. It's not human light. It's not the sunlight. It is the light that is beyond time and space, that is full of delight, that is full of bliss and love and joy and peace and goodness. There is no opposite to this light. It's not light and darkness. It's just pure, infinite, oceanic light. So let's just, even if it's conceptually, open our heart, our body, our mind, and our soul to this extraordinary, infinite, and eternal light. And let us hear its creative story as each and every one of us. Each of our lights, an extraordinary, brilliant, creative gift of the cosmos. Everything that you are is exactly who you are supposed to be, just as you are now. That burning bush has always been there. At the center of our heart, at the center of our soul, is this burning, radiating bush. and we allow all the outer defenses and false beliefs to dissolve away, to reveal that inner essence that simply says, here I am. Here I am. I invite you to say inside of yourself now, here I am. I am. Just as I am, I am. Nothing needs to be changed. I do not need to become someone I am not. I do not have to chase some ideal that I think is going to fix me. There's nothing to chase. There is no ideal that's going to fix me. The only thing that's going to heal me is to be I am, to be right where I am, grounded in this human experience as I am. Nothing can move or forsake the I amness, because I was birthed with this light. I live as this light. I express as this light. I live my entire life for all eternity as this beautiful, radiant I am. Free, unlimited, unbounded, unconstrained, just me. Just me in all my simplicity. I am. And we know that in this great I am, it truly is already done. And so it is. Amen and amen.
I walk in God.